and then 52 we'll recite together. That's correct, right? Prakritireva matmanam avivicya buddha puman tatvena sparsha samudha samsaram pratipadyate. Translation. An unintelligent man, failing to distinguish himself from material nature, thinks nature to be real. By contact with it, he becomes completely bewildered and enters into the cycle of material existence. Purport. A similar verse is found in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.5. Yaya sammohito jiva atmanam drigunatmakam paropi manutenartham tatkritam cha vipadyate. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. So now we'll do 52 responsively. Sattva sangha drishin devan rajasa suramanusa tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi Sattvat sangadrishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi Sattva sangadrishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi. Make the font bigger? Sure. That's maximum. Sorry. Everything has its limitations in the material world.
Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi. Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusham Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi.
Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi.
Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi.
Mataji's.
Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi. Sattva sangha drishin devan Rajasa suramanusha Tamasa bhutatiryatvam Bhramito yati karmabhi.
Sattva sangat, by association with the mode of goodness, Rishin to the sages, Devan to the demigods, Rajasa by the mode of passion, Asura to the demons, Manusha and to human beings, Tamasha by the mode of ignorance, Bhuta to the ghostly spirits, Tiryaktvam or the animal kingdom, Brahmitaha made to wonder, Yati he goes, Karmabhi because of his spiritive activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Made to wonder because of his fruitive work, the conditioned soul by contact with the mode of goodness takes birth among the sages or the demigods. By contact with the mode of passion, he becomes a demon or human being. And by association with the mode of ignorance, he takes birth as a ghost or in the animal kingdom. The word Tiryaktvam means the status of an animal, which includes all lower forms of life, such as beasts, birds, insects, fish, and plants. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Om Ajnana Hasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishram Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki. With your blessings and permission, seniors are here, so please give me your blessings. I'll try to share something on this beautiful section of the Bhagavatam. So here we are reading the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, and I thought before to discuss the verse just to give a context, because this part of the Bhagavatam is incredibly important. And before going into this part of the Bhagavatam, as we know we are reading from the Uddhav Gita, just to share something with you of the ingenious way in which Krishna reveals knowledge to the world. If you actually study Shastra closely, then you will see that there is a pattern in how Krishna actually teaches the world. So here, for example, if we look at the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, then you'll see that actually the strategy of both Shastras actually mirror each other. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, you see chapter 1 is just basically a preface to the entire book, isn't it? Because chapter 1 is entitled Observing the armies. So actually there's no knowledge there. All that's happening is you're hearing the situation of Arjun that then leads to an inquiry. And what's Arjun's inquiry? He's undergoing a dharma shamuddha. So he says, what is my duty? And then if you look at the Bhagavatam, then basically if you look at the Canto 1, then it's basically also a preface. Because in Canto 1, the conversation between Sukadeva and Parikshit hasn't begun yet. Because all you hear about in Canto 1 is all the events leading up to Parikshit being cursed. And then finally when Parikshit is cursed and he arrives at the Ganga, some say the Yamuna, then he asks a question just like Arjun asks a question. And what is the question that Parikshit asks? What is the duty of somebody about to die? Interesting, a similar strategy. Now if you look at chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, then what is chapter 2 called? Contents of the Gita summarized. So basically in chapter 2, Krishna immediately reveals all the knowledge to Arjuna. And if you look at Canto 2 of the Bhagavatam, and specifically chapters number 1 to 3, then immediately Bhagavatam is actually summarized in those, sorry, my handwriting is off. Bhagavatam is actually summarized in those 3 chapters. It's actually said that when Parikshit asked Sukadeva the question, Sukadeva got so inspired to reply to Parikshit that he just started speaking without even doing a Mangalacharan. He didn't even do any prayers because he got so enthusiastic to just tell Parikshit the answer to his question. And then at the end of the 3rd chapter, then Sukadeva said, oh yeah, I didn't do Mangalacharan. So in the 4th chapter he does a Mangalacharan. And then what he does is he continues speaking. But actually he summarizes the whole knowledge of the Bhagavatam in 3 chapters, because if you remember, the 3rd chapter of the 2nd canto is entitled Pure Devotional Service, the Change in Heart. And therefore he comes to the conclusion. Can you see how it's very, very similar? If you look at the Bhagavad Gita, then we say chapters number 7 to 12 are basically Bhakti Yoga, right? The heart of the Krishna's teachings is always in the middle. So if you look at the Bhagavatam, then if you look at Canto 10, this is also the case. Now someone may say, but Canto 10 isn't right in the middle. But actually it is. Because if you look at the number of verses in the Bhagavatam is 18,000, and if you look roughly, 9 cantos cover about roughly 9,000 verses, and 10, 11, 12 actually cover another 9,000 verses. And therefore, just like the heart of Krishna's message in the Gita is right in the middle, the heart of the Bhagavatam is also right in the middle, because it's said that roughly the 10th canto was spoken 3.5 days into the conversation, right in the middle. If you look at chapter 9, then that's the heart of the heart, isn't it? Because chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita is what? The most confidential knowledge. So in the same way, if you look in the Bhagavatam, then there is the Canto 10, chapters 29 to 33, which are known as the Rasa Panchadhyaya. And of Krishna's smiling face, or the heart of Krishna in the Bhagavatam, these 5 chapters are said to be the 5 life airs of Krishna. Because it's not just Krishna's pastimes, but it's Krishna's most confidential knowledge. And so, this is also another similarity. And if you look at the final chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, 13 to 19, what are 19? Reading another book. What are the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita all about? Jnana Yoga. Sometimes people ask, after Krishna revealed bhakti, which is the culmination of everything, why did he go back to Gyan? Let's finish it. Finish it with the sweet. Why finish it with Gyan? But the idea is that Krishna gives the essence, but then he gives Gyan to help us understand how to navigate this world. And similarly, after the Bhagavatam has spoken Krishna's beautiful pastimes, then cantos number 11 and 12 are all about Jnana Yoga, all about detachment. And basically, therefore, what we're reading right now in the 11th canto is the part of the Bhagavatam where Krishna is basically teaching us detachment. And the way he's teaching detachment is through Uddhava in the Uddhav Gita, because the Uddhav Gita, believe it or not, is actually the longest philosophical section of the Bhagavatam. Uddhav ji knows that Krishna is going to leave the world, and therefore he is also thinking, I also want to leave. But Krishna, what he tells Uddhav ji to do is two things. He says, the first thing is, I want you to take sannyas, I want you to renounce the world, and I want you to do one other service for me before you leave this world. One service that I couldn't do. Anyone know what that service was? There's one thing that Krishna couldn't do.
Go to Bhadrak Ashram and speak to the sages.
Exactly, yes. He wanted to. Krishna went to so many places and enlightened so many people, but he couldn't make the journey to Bhadrak Ashram and teach the sages there, so he told Uddhav ji, I want you to take sannyas, I want you to absorb this knowledge, and then I want you to go to Bhadrak Ashram and basically share this knowledge with the sages. So, we've compared Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, but now, if we compare Bhagavad Gita and Uddhav Gita, then again we will see the same strategy. Because if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, if we're looking at chapters number, 13 to 18, the final 6 chapters, if you look at 13, is basically Sankhya Yoga. So let me change something. Oh, okay, sure. That's okay. If you look at chapter number 13 of the Gita, is basically Sankhya Yoga. And if you look at that, that same thing is described in Uddhav Gita. If you look at chapter number 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, it's the 3 modes of material nature. Same thing is described in the Uddhav Gita. That's what we read today. If you look at chapter number 15 of the Gita, is basically the tree, the banyan tree of the material world, all about detachment. Same thing, described in the Uddhav Gita. And if you look at 17, 18, it's talking again about the modes, but specifically Varnashram. And that's also described in Uddhav Gita. And therefore everything that Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, he basically expands more in Uddhav Gita. This is what Srila Prabhupada writes in the 3rd canto. Undoubtedly, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to encourage Arjuna to fight. And yet, to complete the transcendental knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhav. The Lord wanted Uddhav to fulfill his mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. So therefore Krishna had the same purpose, but he wanted to reveal things in more detail, and therefore he spoke the Uddhav Gita. Here is a comparison, just so you know, between the Bhagavad Gita and the Uddhav Gita. They each have their sources. Uddhav Gita is incredibly long philosophical disposition, over 1,000 verses, bigger than Bhagavad Gita. And the scene is obviously different. Bhagavad Gita spoken on a battlefield, Uddhav Gita spoken on the eve of Krishna's departure from this world. And if you look at both conversations, it's very interesting. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Krishna is telling Arjuna not to renounce, but to stay in the world and fight the battle. But in the Uddhav Gita, when Krishna gives his final instructions, then he is encouraging Uddhav to renounce and take sannyas. And therefore we understand that the same knowledge can be given, but when it's given to different people in different times, places and circumstances, it may be applied in different ways. That is how you intelligently, therefore, Guru Sadhu Shastra Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikya. If you want to understand Shastra, you also have to understand how to apply it appropriately, and therefore you need Guru and Sadhu to tell you how to apply Shastra, because the same Shastra can be applied and mean different things to different people in different stages of their lives. And so like this, the contents of the both conversations are basically the same, yet in Uddhav Gita there is further elaboration and further detail. The format of both conversations is also slightly different. Whereas Bhagavad Gita is a philosophical exposition full of principles and instructions, Uddhav Gita has many, many metaphors, stories. And there are highlights. In the Bhagavad Gita we have the Chatu Shloki, 10.8 to 10.11. And in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita we have the Tri Shloki Gita as well. And in Uddhav Gita we also have different highlights of conversations. Bhikshu Gita is the Avanti Brahmana, Aila Gita is Pururava, like that. And then they conclude in different ways. Arjuna picks up his bow and fights because Arjuna was being spoken to on a battlefield and Krishna applied the knowledge in that way. But Uddhavji, he was about to take sannyas, and after being empowered in these teachings by Krishna, he indeed took sannyas and then he traveled and delivered philosophy. So like this we can see there is a comparison, and it's very, very interesting. I won't go through all, I'm just giving you a highlight, but it's very, very interesting. Exactly the same things that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, almost verbatim, the same things are said in the Uddhav Gita. Just as Krishna explains in the 7th chapter that everything is there, there's nothing more for you to know, almost identically a similar verse is found in the Uddhav Gita. When an inquisitive person comes to understand this knowledge, he has nothing further to know. Both of these expositions are completely comprehensive. So you find these verses mirrored. I'll give you another example. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Nachatasman manusheshu kashin me priyakritama bhavita nachame tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. Krishna says, you must share this knowledge, then you become very dear to me. And in the Uddhav Gita, Krishna says exactly the same thing. One who liberally disseminates this knowledge among my devotees is the bestower of the absolute truth, and to him I give my very own self. Amazing. Same things are being said. Here's another one. In the Gita, Krishna explains, one who studies this conversation worships me by his intelligence. And in the Uddhav Gita, exactly the same thing. He who loudly recites this supreme knowledge, which is most lucid and purifying, becomes purified day by day. For he reveals me to others with the lamp of transcendental knowledge. Like this, Krishna explains the value. And the concluding words of Gita, as we know, always think of me, become my devotee. And if you look at Uddhav Gita, basically Krishna concludes by saying exactly the same things. And who can understand? Again, same thing is said. Krishna says, this confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engaged in devotional service. In the Bhagavatam, exactly the same thing is said. You should not share this instruction with anyone who is hypocritical, atheistic or dishonest, or with anyone who will not listen faithfully, who is not a devotee, or who is simply not humble. So like this, why am I showing this to you? Why am I going through all of these things? To basically show that when Krishna wants to reveal knowledge to the world, he does it in a very deliberate, systematic, organized, and purposeful way. Sometimes we read Shastra and we think like it's a little bit all over the place, and where's the flow here and where's the connection. Sometimes we don't understand why this first, why this second. But when you begin looking closely at Shastra, you begin to understand that everything is in a certain place, in a certain order, delivered in a certain way for a reason, because who can be more intelligent than Krishna? He knows how to reach the heart and mind of the living entities. And so in this section of Bhagavatam, specifically in the Uddhav Gita now we're reading about the three modes of material nature. So here in this verse is being explained that the conditioned soul, according to whatever mode of nature they develop, that will determine their next destination. If one reads the final purports that Srila Prabhupada gave before he left this world in Vrindavan, then he's talking about this exact thing actually. I think the final purport that Srila Prabhupada gave in the Bhagavatam 10th canto actually talks about this very thing, because he talks about how in contact with different modes of material nature, that will determine one's destination. And therefore he makes a very, very famous statement, maybe one of his final statements before he left this world, while he's reciting that commentary to that verse. He says, one should always seek good association. One should always seek good association, because from that association it will determine the qualities that one develops, and that will determine one's destination. So just as there are many, many verses in the Gita delineating the different effects of the different modes of nature, similarly here in the Uddhav Gita we're learning about how if you contact different modes of nature, it will then give you birth in different species or statuses of life. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Okay, I could speak more, but maybe I'll just pause here and see whether you may have any questions or any comments on anything I've said so far. Then we can have a discussion. Yes?
Maharaj, one question that why is it that both Bhagavatam and Gita have been concluded in Jnana Yoga as a conclusion? Because somebody may say, well, that is a kind of conclusion, so you should follow that, not Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah. In commentating on the Bhagavad Gita, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the Bhagavad Gita is like a jewel box. And what he says is that the first 6 chapters are like the base of the jewel box. The middle 6 chapters are the jewel within the jewel box, bhakti. And what he says is that the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are like the lid which protect the jewel. And so his analysis of why Krishna ends the Bhagavad Gita with Jnana Yoga is because that knowledge of detachment protects the purity of devotional service. In other words, once we know what the goal is, then what Krishna then does is he comes back down to the material world and he says, this is what you're now surrounded by, and in order to get to where I want you to get to, this is what you're going to have to contend with now. And therefore you see so much of the final 6 chapters and the Jnana Yoga section is all about how to live surrounded by material influence. Because Krishna can give the knowledge of how to, what the goal of life is, pure love for Krishna, but we are not there. Most of us are struggling here in the material world. And you know, look at the questions at the end of any Bhagavatam class. Look at the questions that people ask. Generally, the questions are not about, is Krishna doing this in the spiritual world, or what does Krishna wear, or the questions are all about, Prabhu, how can I make sure I wake up and chant my rounds? Prabhu, how do I stay free from bad association? Prabhu, I have this obstacle in my material life, how can I deal with it? 80% of questions at the end of the class are to do with this. Because we are not there. We are dealing with the chaos here. And therefore Krishna always ends the philosophical exposition by giving the ideal of where we want to be. But then Krishna gives the stepping stones that we will have to go through. In other words, the detachment that we have to engender before we can awaken bhakti. So there's no question of awakening bhakti until we become detached. Bhogeshvarya prashaktanam taya parita chetasham vyavasayatmika buddhi samadho nuvidhiyate. Krishna says, while you are attached to material things, don't think that you'll ever be able to attain pure, focused devotion. For that you have to learn first how to let go of the material world. And therefore Jnana Yoga is there for that purpose, not as the conclusion, but as very much the ways and the means which help us to then achieve bhakti. Does that make sense? Thank you. Anyone else would like to ask any questions? Yes.
Maharaj, could you elaborate more on the association? It's very important. Can you elaborate more on the Vani and Vapu association?
Yes, so association with spiritually minded people is incredibly important. Once the Swaminarayan sadhus had come to the manor, so I was having a conversation with them. And we were talking about Bhagavatam, and then I asked them, for you, which is the most important verse in Bhagavatam? And they recited a verse, and I was pleasantly surprised. Very beautiful verse. He recited a verse from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, Kapila Dev's instructions to Devahuti. Prashanga majaram pasham atmana kavayo vidu sa eva sadhushu krito mokshadvaram apavritam. He said, for us, this is the most important verse in Bhagavatam. Prashangam ajaram pasham. Attachment to materialistic people is the greatest source of entanglement. Saeva sadhushu krito. But when you transfer that attachment and become attached to a sadhu, moksha dvaram apavritam. The doors to liberation open. So anyone who becomes attached to associating with a spiritual person, anyone who becomes attached to hearing from a spiritual person, anyone who learns to love someone who loves Krishna, perfection is guaranteed. Krishna bhakti janma mula hoya sadhu sang. Krishna prema janma teho punamukhya ang. Kaviraj Goswami says that the very janma mula, the very root cause of the awakening of bhakti, hoya sadhu sang, is the association of a saintly person. So yes, we must always seek saintly association, as Srila Prabhupada says. And that association comes in 2 different forms, Vapu and Vani, as we know, the physical association and also the instructions. So at one point we know that the spiritual master will perform their final pastime, and therefore they will then disappear from the world. But actually, we can understand that this pastime of the spiritual master is another stage in the deepening of the relationship. Viraha means separation. But viraha, our acharyas say, has a double meaning. Vishesha, rahasya, unmilam. Viraha means separation, but it also means vishesha, special, rahasya, confidential, milanam, meeting. In separation, the mysticism of our teachings is that there is actually in that separation a very special type of confidential meeting. And that very special type of confidential meeting with the departed soul comes in the form of internalizing their vani and then feeling the presence in the life of the spiritual master who lives forever is in his instructions, isn't it? Prabhupada writes, the spiritual master lives forever in his instructions and the follower lives with him. One time Srila Prabhupada had gone past Chaitanya Math in Mayapur, you know, Chaitanya Math, where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's samadhi is. So Prabhupada walked past, but he didn't go inside, he just walked past. So then some of his contemporaries began criticizing, oh, just see, Swami Maharaj, he did not pay respects to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He did not come in. And Prabhupada, when he heard that, he said, they have not understood. I'm walking with my spiritual master all the time. I'm feeling his presence all the time. They think I have to go to the samadhi to feel his presence. My spiritual master is always there with me. So yes, who is feeling that presence, the one who is very, very connected. So like that, through understanding, and the instructions of the spiritual master are very, very mystical. Sometimes you can't understand the order of the spiritual master. It's not intelligible to you why he would say this. Even Srila Prabhupada said, when my spiritual master told me to print books, I was thinking, what is this? Like, what will this do? But he said, I followed blindly. I just did it because he told me to. I had no idea. And he said, now I can practically see how through this book distribution, the whole Krishna consciousness movement has spread. But he didn't understand the instruction, but he had faith. So instructions are sometimes not understandable. Instructions of the spiritual master, they can never be denied, but sometimes they may be delayed, but they should never be denied. Sometimes we may receive an instruction from the spiritual master and we think, can't do this. But that doesn't mean you should deny it. Wait. A time in your life will come when you can do it. Just like Srila Prabhupada got the order to preach in the Western world in 1922 when he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But he didn't leave till 1965, 43 years later. The spiritual master's instruction may be delayed but never denied. Another thing about the instruction of the spiritual master is that it's unlimited. No one can ever say, I've done it. Because the spiritual master is so expert that he will give you an instruction that will keep you busy for many lifetimes. Because every instruction of the spiritual master can be unlimitedly followed and developed. Srila Prabhupada was told by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, to spread Krishna consciousness in the English-speaking world. Prabhupada could have written one English book and stopped. I've done it. But he didn't. He wrote till the final moment of his life, 60 books. Prabhupada could have gone to New York, established one temple, and said, I did it. I fulfilled the order to preach in the English-speaking world. But he didn't. He carried on traveling till the end of his life and opened 108 temples and circled the globe 14 times. Prabhupada could have made one disciple in the English-speaking world and said, I did it. But he didn't. He initiated 5,000. So in this way, Prabhupada was always going above and beyond the call of duty, understanding that the order of the spiritual master is unlimited. So as one takes those instructions very deeply within the heart, then one will feel the presence. It is very much to do with one's commitment and one's absorption. And from that, the presence of the spiritual master is felt very strongly. Does that help? Thank you so much. Who at the back has a question? Sorry, bro, I didn't. I only heard tap. Potential?
How to tap our own potential.
How to tap our own potential.
How we are sure that that potential will give us the way to back to God.
So, as I understand, you're saying Krishna has invested us with different abilities, different potentials. How do we tap that? And how do we ensure that we're doing the best that we can? Yeah, thank you. Very nice question. Therefore, the spiritual master is there because the spiritual master expertly knows how to awaken the potentiality of the disciple. His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he gave a very nice definition of the spiritual master. He said the spiritual master is that person who can come up with a vision for your life that's much greater than what you could have come up with yourself. So we have a certain idea, what is my potential, what is my potency, what can I do with my life? But then when a Vaishnava with a greater vision comes into the picture, then that person can open up worlds that you never knew about. So therefore, even Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur tapped his potential, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur looked at him and said, you're young, you're intelligent, why don't you spread Krishna consciousness all over the world? And that was never in Srila Prabhupada's mind. But the spiritual master's instruction ignited that potential, and then it happened. So the first thing is that one must allow a Vaishnava into their life. In Vaishnava circles, nobody is self-made. There's no such thing as a self-made Vaishnava. Every great Vaishnava served another great Vaishnava. That is the Vaishnava way. And so if you want to reach your potential, first you need guidance. And then the second thing you need is faith. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru. The same faith that you have in Krishna, you have to have that same faith in the spiritual master. Once Srila Prabhupada's contemporaries were discussing Krishna consciousness will spread all over the world, the holy name, how will it happen? It's not even spreading in India. And then Prabhupada made the famous statement. He said, some fool who has complete faith in the order of Chaitanya Dev and Guru Gauranga, some fool, he will do it. But it won't be you. Because you don't have the faith. Therefore, who has faith? Yes, first let a Vaishnava in your life and then they will give you instructions. But next thing is, do you have faith? And then if you have faith, the next thing to tap your potential is you have to have the discipline, the determination, the complete dedication to give your heart and soul to fulfilling that. And if you do that, then the magic begins. And the prime example is Srila Prabhupada. Another example is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. How was his potential tapped? In the middle of the night, he got the dream from Nityananda. Hare Hare Krishnadas na karaha bhai, Vrindavana yahataha sarvalabhyahai. Oh Krishna Das, you don't worry. In the morning you go to Vrindavan. Everything you will achieve there. So Nityananda gave that instruction to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He followed it. He went to Vrindavan. And there in Vrindavan, Sarva Labhyahai, indeed he got everything. He got topmost residence. He was living in Radha Kund. He got the topmost association. He was with the Goswamis of Vrindavan. And he got the topmost service in the world, writing Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because in the order of the spiritual master, all the wealth is lying. Yet who is able to take that order? So that's how we tap the potential. Some thoughts. Yes. Is there a mic for Prabhuji?
Maharaj seem to demonstrate great detachment and Krishna consciousness of the one's life. And you comment on Mangalacharan Maharaj passing and how he thought passing.
Yes. Yes, Maharaj here last year, around April, maybe April, maybe around that time. I remember he phoned me and he said that he had just gone to the doctor. He had just got the test back. And he said, yeah, I think the time is coming now. He said, this is it, this is the final call. So on that call, Maharaj was like a manager. So he had already, as soon as he got the news, he had already made all the plans, what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. But the striking thing that hit me in that conversation was that he was still thinking about how he could maximize his service in the time he had left. And so he said, I don't want just longevity of life. I want to have quality so that I can serve the devotees as much as possible in these final stages. And so he said, Jai Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki. And so in that conversation he said, I've decided I won't take any treatment. There's no point, because what's the point of a long life without service? He says the purpose of life is to serve. So rather, I think now Krishna is telling me to go to Vrindavan. He says, but I want to do a few final things before I go to Vrindavan. So then Maharaj, for 3-4 months, he began traveling extensively. He came here to the Sadhu Sangha festival. He wanted to meet many great Vaishnavas, sadhus. He said, I want their blessings. And then in Radhastami, last year he went to Vrindavan. And he said, now I won't leave Vrindavan. Now he would say, I began my spiritual life in Vrindavan. I took my spiritual birth here. And now Krishna has brought me back here for the final stage. So then he came there. And in those months he was in Vrindavan, initially it was understood that he may only live for 3 months. So that was in Radhastami last year. So he was planning like that, but he was taking the devotees out on parikrama, he was doing programs, he was still leading kirtan. We would walk with him to the Krishna Balaram temple and he would say today I'll do kirtan, but I'll just do mellow kirtan. And then 5 minutes into the kirtan, he was he said, what can I do? I just have to expend all of my energy for Krishna now. I have to try. So he was serving like that, and then in maybe in the end of January of this year, Then he decided that, okay, the system has become blocked, nothing is passing through the system. So he understood that was Krishna's indication that then nothing should go into the system. So then he stopped eating. So practically for the last 30 days he didn't eat anything. He was only drinking water. So for 30 days he was drinking water. And the interesting thing is that in the last 6 months of his life, or in these last months of his life, he didn't also take any medication or any painkillers. He was just basically drinking water and hearing and chanting. So it's hard to imagine the level of pain that someone in that situation, with multiple tumors, but somehow he just exhibited that detachment, and yeah, for the last 30 days he only water. And interestingly, up until the day before he left the world, he was still active, he was still walking. He never became bedridden, actually. And on the final day of His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj was staying with us, so about 1 o'clock in the morning, Maharaj came running into the room and he called all of us. He said, "I think it's now, the final time." So then I began a kirtan. We 3-4 of us were there. We began a kirtan. And then at one point, it seemed as though he was about to leave. And then, so we were all looking over him chanting. And then he opened his eyes and he smiled and he waved. He said, "Not yet." And then the morning went by. He would do his Giriraj Puja at about 6 a.m. in the morning, but because it seemed like the situation was so acute, because Giriraj was in his room and we didn't want to disturb with everything, they didn't do the puja, they just delayed it. Then it went 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and then the devotee said, "Well, we have to do Giriraj's puja because we don't know how long it will be." So then the devotees came into the room and they offered all the offerings to Giriraj. And very interestingly, after they made the offering, they offered arati to Giriraj. And so Maharaj was on the bed next to Giriraj, and as soon as they offered the arati and the lamp came off, then he kind of turned around. He took darshan of Giriraj and they gave him the lamp. And then he took the lamp, and then after taking the lamp and Giriraj's puja had been done, then he just went back onto his back, and then he almost just went like this, so that he was just spread across the bed like this. And then everyone could understand. There's a certain breathing change that takes place when someone's about to leave their body. So then his breathing changed, and then many devotees came into the room, many senior devotees, disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And then to a resounding kirtan at 12:06 p.m. In the afternoon, Maharaj departed from the world. So it was a great lesson in detachment, how to accept with grace the call of Krishna, and how to go to Vrindavan and make your life successful. So we're so fortunate. Of course, Srila Prabhupada showed that example, the final lesson of how to ultimately become detached. This is what Krishna is teaching Uddhav in this section. He's preparing him to leave the world. And as Srila Prabhupada said, don't think that this won't happen to you. You will also have to go through this. So in this way, all of these teachings are very, very relevant to our lives, whether we know it or not. All these teachings of detachment will ultimately come to us, come to our rescue in the time of need. when we need to actually move on from this situation. That's okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we should end here. Yes, we should end here. Thank you so much. Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you so much.
Actually, I was in Dallas, like for business work.
Oh, you live in Dallas?
So we met over there in program.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember that. So I came for business purpose yesterday. And I know your program, so I just came for morning program today. Go to office now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate that.
Thank you. This people from Svayam people.